All right, everybody, we are live. What's going on, my lifers? We are on. Everybody in the chat, please let me know for sure that you can see everything and that you can hear everything because this is the first time I've done the show like this. So I'm not sure if everything is popping. It seems like everything is working okay. I'm looking at the replay. It looks good. All right. So I think we're good. So tonight, guys, I am joined by a couple of my friends. There's probably going to be some more that join us here in a little bit. But you've seen Coletra, the amazing attorney, the shark, on here before. This is Coletra. She is an amazing attorney here. This is my friend James. James is a financial analyst on here, another good friend. And I'm
Something
also
like that.
joined. Say what, James?
Something like that. Business
So,
analyst. But yeah, we'll
business
see.
analyst. And and I'm also joined by another YouTuber. I connected with her a long time ago, and we've probably been trying for like over a year to get together on the same stream. And her channel is so good, guys. I'm gonna spam it in the chat, but her handle is Vera747. She has an amazing channel. She was an extra Jehovah's Witness as well. She is an extra Jehovah's Witness, but she speaks on a lot of different topics on her channel. And the one that I've been interested in recently is all the astrology stuff that you've been doing, which is really interesting, really, really cool. So, guys, if you haven't seen her channel, I'm going to spam it down here in the chat. But today's topic, we got a lot of people in the chat already. What's going on, Great Dane? Aunt Renee is in the chat. John Self, what's going on? KB, it's good to see you as well. Holistic Hottie, I don't think I've seen you here before, but it's always good to see some new people. But today is the first episode of another show that I want to do called The Majority Report, where we talk about issues that involve Black people, African Americans, whatever you want to say. And today's topic is about activism. This was a topic that was suggested to be by one of my moderators. Um, and which way is most beneficial. So I want to do this topic because there have been a lot of different things happening with activism lately. And these are some people that I respect their opinions on. I feel like it's going to be a good discussion in the chat, a lot of live call ins, things like that. So let's just go ahead and get class in session. Let's get it popping. Let's get it popping. So I want to start this off with the shark, Corletra. Corletra, as an attorney, how do you think the law affects the way that activism is happening here in the country right now?
Um, ooh, I mean, there's always and constantly being different regulations put in place on, for example, you're talking about activism, and we may get into like protesting, and you have your peaceful marches and different things, and then, it's gotten to a point that depending on your, I think, possibly your city and your county and your state, there's certain regulations and things that you have to get permits for in order to have those peaceful protests. I don't know, to be quite honest, how strict they are.
Mm-hmm.
But if peaceful protesting is something that you want to do and marching, um, you know, you see it all the time on TV where the authorities have come in and they're kind of barricading and not letting the crowds through, even though they're being peaceful. So I think there's so much gray area that it affects those that are trying to um, kind of get the word out and march and protest, because it can be interpreted in so many ways. The
Mm-hmm.
different the rules and regulations, because there's no black and white. So I think that the laws and regulations need to be more specific, and become more black and white on what you can and can't do. Because I think right now authorities are using their ability to interpret it how they want to restrict more than they should.
Interesting. Let me ask this question because it's actually one of the things I want to talk about. How do you guys feel about marching? Is marching something that is actually helpful in the quest for results within activism?
I don't know. I mean, no, seriously, like I think when my parents were growing up, yes,
Mm,
there seemed to be more of a collective, people coming together. And I'm just not even trying to be pessimistic, but I just don't see it working. Like right now, I see folk get upset, go march for 2 days, and then forget and go on to the next hot topic. What's
right.
hot right now on social media? That's what we're gonna talk about for the next week, and then I'm gonna forget about it and go to something else. You know,
James, what do you think? You had a funny smile on your face at that question.
I mean, because I had like a real, I guess I had a pessimistic answer, and then I had an answer like, I guess it's more symbolic. It's more of just a symbol. It doesn't really mean anything. It's kind of like looking at the Bible or looking at a cross. Like the actual symbol of the cross doesn't mean anything, but what you believe in holds the value in it. So marching in itself is that, but it's also now just something to do. You know, it's just something to do that's cool. Like, okay, yeah, we marched, but then what? Like, you forget about it the next 2 days, or something else happens, and then you're on a whole nother subject, like Cece said. So, I mean, that's my take on it.
I like that illustration with the cross. That was actually pretty cool, man. What do you think, V?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's what the value that you see in it. And I also think that there has to be a sequential plan. Okay, we march. And what if you don't get what you want after you march? What happens after that? What are you holding out to those who are in power that is going to make them pay attention to you? If there's nothing after a march, I don't think there's any fear of you. So we have to figure out, what are our steps. If we're not heard with one thing, what's the next step after that? And I feel like with Martin Luther King, they hit people in the pocket. That's what we need to do.
mhm.
It's the pocket that does the work.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, V, because one of the questions I have on the list is about how the Montgomery bus boycotts worked so well because it was an actual financial thing. Now, do you think, or do any of us think, that that is something, one, why hasn't it been replicated? And two, do you think in this day and time it's something that actually can be replicated and stuck to the way it was back then?
Honestly, no, because everything for us nowadays is what's the next best thing. So, like, prime example is like everybody was up in arms about H&M. Okay, well, I can go shop at Zara, but if Zara's do something, I can go shop at Forever 21. Like, it's so many of the same thing that's out there. It's like they don't, a company like that's not going to see a big financial hit because it's only going to last for so long. Unlike at that time, in those times when with the Montgomery bus boycott, you had a whole group of people that were dependent upon that transit system because mass transit at that time was the most efficient way to get around. So when you had a sector of people that was your main source of income not doing it, yeah, you felt it. But right now we don't have that because we don't have anything in our own community that we actually do
Mhm.
for ourselves, which kind of sucks. But I mean, it's the truth. Like then you have to look at the dynamic of most all people of color lived in the same neighborhood. Their grocery store was in that neighborhood owned by somebody that looked like them. Like everything that they did was somebody that was of them. But then as corporations and time goes on, big corporations move in and then you get Walmarts, you get your Targets, you get all this. So those mom and pop shops left. So therefore, the dollar is not circulating the same way it used to. Like that's like socioeconomic scale about how black people where the money goes. That's like real, and that still holds true and still holds value. Like it's not none of that stuff is there because I won't say the support is there because everybody always screaming claiming support, but it's just the option. Like if that's your only option, that's what you go to, and people have more than one option at this point in time and these days, and so that's what's killing it. It's the options.
Wow.
Good point. Do you think
Very good
that
point. Mm.
if there was a way, or let's just not say a way, let's say that that wasn't the case, and people were, as black people, we were able to secure a type of financial stability within the community, some real wealth, would that then delete the need for activism, or would that wealth aid in activism?
Mm.
I mean, honestly, I would. I think it would be more so. It wouldn't be a need to be active because what do you then you have to look at what's the protest about, like what are we fighting for, because if I have everything that I need in my community, what else do I want? It's kind of like the way that you look at gentrification when you put up all these neighborhoods. They put everything that they need in those neighborhoods so that you don't have to leave the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's
True.
no need to protest if you got what you need, because if you have what you need and you're stable, then your protest becomes something that's bigger than that. So I mean, I guess it's graduated levels to everything.
So do you think having the wealth would completely quell all of the other issues that drive activism?
Mm, I wouldn't say the wealth would quail it, or it would just make it so there would probably be, looking at this day and age of time, it'll probably be another reason to protest, because then somebody's mad about, well, why is the wealth being dispersed this way? Why not this way? Like there's always something that somebody's gonna be
Not
upset
happy about.
about or
Hmm.
feel some type of way about. Like that's just the day and age that we live in. Like it's I mean, I don't know if I can cuss or not. This shit's just fucked up though.
Yeah, it's cool. I cuss all the time on here. Yeah, that's the thing. There are a lot of other things, and that kind of moves me to another topic, another question, because even in our communities, we know that there are a lot of churches, there are a lot of religion in our community. Is the religion slash church, is it doing enough to help the struggle, or is church really making us more passive to the fact that we need to be more active about things? What does religion and the church's part in our communities play in activism? What do you think, V?
Oh boy.
I know that's
You
why.
want to get me started. Oh man. All right, I'll have to censor my entire opinion, but
Why?
I'll
Don't
try
censor
to.
yourself. Not on here.
Oh man, you know how I feel about religion,
I
but
know. I
I
feel very similar.
I feel like we have to start putting venues on trial. And I believe religion is one of the largest venues that has led to the destruction of our communities. We have put money into them, and money has not been put back into our communities. They've garnered wealth because of us, and yet the people who are giving away their tithes are the ones that are the poorest in the communities. Why aren't the churches building supermarkets in Detroit, Michigan, where there are no markets? So people don't even have a job to go to the supermarket to buy the food, but there are no supermarkets because all the supermarkets left the area. Where are the daycare centers, the different types of things that create a community like James was speaking about? They're not even in Detroit, but there are churches in Detroit. Churches are so wealthy, and they could take so much of that money and put it into the community, and they don't. Who within the financial and economic stability of our community, who has the most money? It's the churches. They have the most money, and yet they invest the least. Sure, they say they invest in people's spiritual, ethical, and moral character, But that's the question as well, isn't it? So there's a lot that has to be put on trial, and we shouldn't be afraid to even put religion on trial, because everyone has a level of culpability, and we all have to start to measure it and see how much we can all add to the community to build it back up again. 1920s Harlem, where is that? You know, but there's a lot more I could say about religion, but I won't.
What do you think on that topic, Shark?
I mean, yes, I'm in agreement with Vera. It's interesting how, and just looking at the different generations, the younger generations, these millennials have so many trust issues with the church. A lot of them, they don't go to church because they don't see the churches doing what they, they're not practicing what they preach,
Mhm.
so they're about service, they're about community, and I'm not saying all of them are like this, but a good majority, they preach something and then they're not giving back to these communities. And this younger generation, the millennials, are pushing back completely. They're just, church, no,
Mm,
I'm not even gonna. For what? Because you're not going to do what you say. I see that a lot with the younger generation. So I don't think, once again, I don't think that um I think they give back some, but not enough. Like Vera said, there's mega churches out here,
mm,
mega churches bringing in, you know, six, seven, well, 7, 8, 9, 10 figures, and no, the communities that they're in aren't seeing it,
mm.
and you're trying to figure out why. And then I can run with this and start talking about politics, because you get into these churches are tied to politicians and the politics in the city,
Yep.
and it's just, I think it's gotten away from, not all, but some have gotten away from, or a good majority of what they were there to do. They were started to help build the communities that they were in, and they've kind of taken that, what they started in, and they still have the support from the older generations who believe that the churches are giving back, so they still go. But it's just not the same, and they're not putting back as much as they sit into these communities. And this younger generation, you can tell it's having a negative impact on them, and they don't trust church at all.
Agreed. Agreed. We're joined too by my friend Khalil. What's going on, Khalil?
What's going on, Shadow? What's up, man?
Mm,
um, Here's another question because Cece touched on something. Again, Cece is psychic. She knows like exactly what's where I'm going with my questions.
mm,
But there seems to be a huge difference between the way the younger generation is acting out activism and the way the older generation handled activism. And then there's a huge gap between the way the older generation views the younger generation and vice versa. And the question I have with that is, what are the biggest differences between the way that activism was handled back, say, in the civil rights time, and the way that it's handled now, and which way is the best way to do it? Because even in the civil rights era, there were some things that were done right, but there were also a lot of things that were not done correctly as well. In the same way with this generation, they're doing a lot of things that seem positive, but they're doing a lot of things that don't seem to be furthering the cause at all. So what are some of the things that this, because the older generation, they're pretty much done. It's up on the younger generation now. So what are some of the things that the younger generation can learn from the older generation to make their activism more effective?
Hey, um, I think like the biggest thing back then, the older generation was a sense of shared struggle and suffering. Now we talked about this before about how long the Montgomery bus boycott lasted, and no one got on the bus. Period. They struggled together, they suffered together. I think now there's a sense of no one is able to go through, you know, the hard times for long enough to see any change together. You have a few people who are able to do it, but collectively together, there's not a lot of unity. We don't do things together, going in the same direction, knowing that hey, this is gonna hurt for a while, but if we go through it, we'll come out better on the other side. There's this sense of instant gratification that everybody wants. You want this,
Mm-hmm.
you want this now. It doesn't happen like that. You have to go through struggle. Tell everybody is a great analogy about how things happen is everybody loves olive oil, but in order for olive oil to be made, that tree has to be shaken and that olive has to be pressed. And so it's that shaking and pressing that gives you the olive oil that everybody likes. We haven't been able to go through that shaking and that pressing process together in a long time. And I think that's one of the things that we need to learn from the older generation. And I don't know if it's and I don't know if it's a sense of the newer generation hasn't learned it, or is it the older generation hasn't taught it well. I think you can see it. You can see it on both sides. But that's kind of my 2 cents. That's how I look at it.
James, what do you think, bro?
I mean, honestly, for me, like we were all at the age of we were old enough to remember and learn about the struggle that they went to from firsthand accounts, like grandparents, great grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
our mothers, our fathers. But when you look at your life, where did you really struggle? Like I can honestly say, like I never seen the struggle because I never had to go through the struggle. So for me, it's like, how do I walk through something I've never been through? Because even though my mom, we weren't rich by any means standard, they never showed me the struggle. They always tried to make it better for me, so I didn't have to struggle. I didn't have to go through it. And so I think that's where a lot of it gets lost in because a lot of the people now in our generation, they've never had to really struggle for anything because we had opportunities afforded to us that wasn't afforded to them. And so now it's in a place of, yeah, I know where I come from, I get it, but in my life, where have I really had to struggle to actually get to a place? You know what I'm saying? Like a real deal struggle. Like where have I had to bunker down with like three or four other people, or we all starving, we ain't ate. Like we never had like that struggle. We've never been in a situation where we could have lost our lives, like fighting for something that means something. Like we never had that struggle. So a lot of the stuff today is real issues, but I don't know if it's actual a struggle that you can actually walk through and see it to the end because it's like what do you know? What do you know of struggle? Like, what do you know as struggle? Like, you don't really know what a real struggle is if you've never seen it or been through it. It's kind of like being in war. Like, I could talk about war. I could tell you strategies on how to win war because I can read a book, I can Google it. But until I'm actually in war, I don't know what to do.
Interesting. Interesting. Very interesting. CC, what you got on that topic before we move to the next one?
I agree with James. It's I think if there's no personal experience or if you haven't personally seen it or experienced it, it's easy to read and be like, "Oh man, that was rough." And you even listen to the stories that your parents were told, and in my situation, my parents were very, very poor. Like, grew up on a farm. Like, I remember going back to my grandmother's house, we still heating up the water, on the stove and doing this, then the third. And seeing that and living across from the cotton fields, and you know certain things were instilled in me at a younger age. Now, granted, once again, though, did I personally have to go through the struggle? No, but I was around it enough to get a sense of what we need to do. But I don't think um enough of that, which is, and it's nothing wrong with the fact that, oh, not everyone's going through the struggle, but if you don't have enough people with that personal experience, I see what James is saying. It just the mm, for lack of a better term, the passion to me just isn't there. And I agree with Khalil. Instant gratification seems to be what I see with the younger generation is top. They don't care about, and this is just my opinion, they want that instant gratification. So if they're upset about something, they may stand together for a second, and then if things aren't going how they think it should, in a week or two, they've jumped ship.
Mm.
Um, so
I sent Vera a clip. I was at home watching her videos, and she made a really interesting point about how someone who has trauma may not be able to get rid of that trauma. They may be wounded, but in being wounded, they could help someone else who is wounded now. And what you said, and what both of you said, all of you actually, kind of ties into another question, because with slavery happening, having happened, a lot of people will say things like, why can't you just get over it? Get over slavery. Slavery is old. It doesn't matter anymore. But if trauma is passed down and wounds are passed down like that, and with the gap between people who actually firsthand have experience of that trauma being so far away from the younger people today who are trying to have some type of activism against it, is it possible for those people who experienced it to actually help deal with what the younger generation is dealing with their wounds and their trauma? And are those wounds and trauma affecting the way the young people actually do their activism? Is there a way for that to actually, do those wounds play a hand in how activism is happening now with the younger generation?
I don't, you know what? I don't know. Because I don't think a lot of people from the younger generation listens to a lot of the older generation right now.
Mm,
I don't know how much I don't know how much it happens, um, because just kind of I guess just kind of look at the way things play out. Uh, the level of activism that we have right now, there are a lot of people doing a lot of really great things out there. But there are a lot of people that are out there just for show. A lot of people that are just doing things just because it looks good. Um, so I'm not sure how much how much anybody is even listening to somebody who's actually been through it and is trying to tell you, hey, here's how it should be. Here's how it will happen. Here's how it happened to me. You know, I'm not certain how much that's going on. I don't know if that dialogue is there that it should be.
yeah.
There should be open dialogue. We learn from each other, and we should be able to learn from each other's life experiences without having to have to experience that firsthand. But I don't know how open that dialogue is. I don't know how receptive people in the newer generation are to it.
V, I want to ask you too. What do you think about how, having had those traumas and us having those wounds, how do you think, or what do you think can be done to help heal those issues that the younger generation has, and not even them, just the older generation? Because is healing those wounds something that will affect in a more positive way the way activism is actually happening?
There was a study that was, to me, this study would set off something that the government, scientists, everyone would not want. They did a study on Holocaust victims, and they found that through the generations, the trauma that happened to the actual victim that actually experienced the Holocaust themselves, they found that they passed on the trauma through their DNA to the next generation. So if we look at the span that Hitler inflicted what he did on the people, let's say it was 10 years, and we compare that to 400 years of our oppression, this trauma that happened 400 years ago is in me. It's in you. It's in every single one of us. And as an astrologer, what we see is that there are ages that come about, and with every age comes a theme or a pattern that plays itself out. For our people as African Americans and those of the diaspora, the descendants of the diaspora, we go through generations where we are agitated by the planetary energies that will instigate a reaction from us. And this is why in the video that I was speaking about, in the video that I did, Fitz, it talked about how in the 1960s, America was experiencing its Chiron return. We call it, in astrological terms, we call it Chiron. And Chiron is like a comet. And that comet, when it inflicts itself down to the planet and gives off its energy, it does that every 50 years. So in a generation of 50 years, wherever it was on the first year, on the 50th year, it will trigger that wound again, and it will open the scarring. And so the pain is re-inflicted upon the people who are now taking in the energy of Chiron. We call Chiron the wounded healer, which means where you are wounded, you now become the healer. You may not fully recover, but you have gained the knowledge and the wisdom of the struggle, as the awesome panel has been speaking about, to now use that information to heal those outside of you, because now you have empathy and you understand the antidote, or you diagnosed it and you also know the antidote. So for Black Americans, I believe as an astrologer that we have our Chiron, our wounds, in the sign of Aries. Aries is the leader. It is courageous, it fights, it is strong, and everyone falls in line behind the leader when the leader is in its rightful position. When you are wounded in Aries, you lack the ability to fight for yourself, even though you're strong enough to do it. Aries, don't ever think an Aries can't fight a war. They know how to fight a war in their mind, and they physically can fight a war because the planet that rules them is the planet of war. And so for African Americans, in the planet of war is where we are wounded. And what happens is, because we are wounded there, every 50 years, that wound is re-triggered. And guess what? 2019 through 2020, we are now being wounded again. And this is why we see all of the shootings happening to our young sons, because of the fact that the planets are attempting, not that there's a conscious intelligence that's doing it, it's just an energetic frequency. This energetic frequency comes every 50 years. And so something has to happen to agitate our wounds. So if our children are being slaughtered in the street, how many of them does it take before our wound is reopened and we now become Aries, courageous and warriors, and fight for our rights? And so in astrology, we call them the ages and we call them generations. So every generation plays their role in the evolution of the planet. And so our generation right now, 2020 through 2024, our people in America will experience almost 1968 all over again, but to a higher level, because what it's doing is bringing us into the next 20 years, into the age of Aquarius. And so we will see things happening. We will be triggered. We will be forced to be wounded, and we're bleeding again. And how are we going to respond to that bleeding? We have no choice but to respond, because it's almost like hot water being poured on us. We are going to either cry because of the hot water, or we are going to respond and try to heal that hot water, that pain. It's happening now, and this is why everything is going on. So keep your eye on 2020 through 2024. There's going to be revolution in this country, and our people, for one, being that America also is wounded in the same area as Black people, as our people. It's powerful. we are going to see America now having to revisit the wounds that they inflicted on us as a people. And so, yeah, I don't want to keep
No, no,
going.
you're good. You're fine. So are you saying that if that's the case, if we don't ever heal these wounds, that this is just a cycle that's going to just keep repeating, or that if we are able to heal them, we can break that cycle and it won't happen again?
Well, just like in 1968, we achieved, right? We achieved almost what we wanted, but not fully. But we took a step. Generations and ages of astrology are incremental steps. And so, a lot of people, and it kind of hurts me, they speak against Obama and they're like, Obama did nothing for Black people.
Yeah, that's
And
one
I'm
of my
like,
questions.
just the fact that he did what he did, people stayed silent when he spoke. He spoke power through his words. He was the visual representation of our possibilities. And so,
Mm,
simply through seeing him there was an incremental step into our reaching our fullest potential. And so, he could not do everything. He was not Messiah. He didn't come to change because it wasn't time yet. In astrology, there are times that happen and there are patterns and there are generations. Obama came right before, on the cusp of our revolution. And so he came to show us our possibilities at the very beginning of what is about to transpire. And so we have a lot to look forward to, but also, no matter, even if we attempted to remain passive, we can't, because
mm,
this is the time of visitation. Chiron is inflicting its wounds again on us. And in 50 years from now, depending on how much we advance now, let's say we take 10 steps ahead, in 50 years from now, Chiron will hit it again and attempt to allow us to evolve even further. So in the human scale, we take evolutionary steps, not a full jump. You can't handle a full recovery. You can't even appreciate a full recovery unless you suffer it. Like Khalil said, if there's no struggle, what can you really appreciate from what you've ever been through? You really can't. You don't have the experience of why you have gratitude for what you achieve. So we need
interesting.
the struggle of Chiron. We needed the wounds in Aries in order to realize how powerful we are. We took the beating. We took all of the infliction that was thrown at us, and that's what Aries does. It is strong. It takes a fight, but it gets back up. And so we will be seeing ourselves get back up, and not saying that we're going to have war on the street. You don't need to win a war with your fists. You can win a war with your mind, and Aries rules the skull, the head. And so we can use our mind, as the panel is doing right now, to try to figure out how are we going to now use the wound that we have to now heal ourselves. And eventually, when we heal, because our Chiron is in Aries, the rest of the zodiac representation of people, races, will follow in line, and the healing will move on to everyone else as well. But we're the head. And so how do we do that? What do we do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You hit a very interesting point too, about about Obama, and that is, it's a topic that people still talk about to this day, about Obama's role in the whole history of everything.
Mhm.
James, I think you're muted, but I wanted to ask you, like, what you thought. You might need to unmute yourself. There you go. What
I
did you
did.
think about Obama's role in activism, advancing the Black struggle when he was president?
Uh, um, that's a that's a that's one, like, I'm gonna say. I actually, you know what? It's hard for. So here's the thing. Obama is not was not the president of just Black people. He was the president of the entire country.
Mhm.
So therefore, it's hard for him to advance one struggle without not advancing everybody else's struggle.
Mhm.
Now, will I say did he do a good job of advancing the struggle of just black people in general, just specifically focused on African Americans in this country? No. Did he advance it for people of ethnicities? Yes. But what happens so many times is the wording in politics is, well, this is for minorities or this is for people of minority descent. You know, that includes Irish, Indian, Native American, like it's a full widespread of people, not just black people. So what happens is what we think is for us is not really for us. It's for a group of people because you
Mm-hmm.
have to have the wording that way. Because honestly, to tell the guys on the truth, he couldn't do nothing for black people, just black people alone. I mean, I don't mean to sound like a pessimist or that he could or that it couldn't have happened, but if he tried to push something that specifically only benefited people of an African American descent, it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have passed because there's so many other people that would have felt left out. So what he had to do was have to put it under an umbrella, hoping that everybody could benefit, including African Americans. But he still had to open it up to other people, which kind of sucks because when you look at other races or other even sexual orientations, there are specific laws, in fact, in government that speak specifically to those actual people. And so it's like the catch-22 of the situation.
Yeah, V and Carletra are making some really interesting faces while James is talking.
Hey,
so
I
so
love
so
them
CC, what you think about that? And then
no,
we'll go to Khalil.
because when Vera first started talking about it, I wish I could have jumped through the phone and gave her a hug, and then then here came James with the, and I'm just no, I'm just on board. I'm in 100% agreement right now. I just no, yes, I mean, at the end of the day, when he was president of the United States, so when I hear people say he didn't do anything for black people, I don't know how they thought he was going to be able to single out African Americans, black people, and just do something specifically for them without getting assassinated. I don't know
Exactly.
how in the world they thought that was going to play out. I don't.
That's right.
Like,
That's right.
But let me ask this:
so
with
That's
you
right.
having said that, the I'm sorry, I had it where it was just on James. You didn't see your beautiful face while you guys were talking, you and V. Um, Having said that, does that speak to the state of America where he was able to do things specifically for other groups and not worry about being assassinated? But when the thought of doing something strictly for black people comes up, one of the things people say is, well, he couldn't do it because he would have gotten assassinated. So, what does that say about how we're viewed as black people in the country, where if the president tries to do something for us, that motherfucker's gonna get assassinated?
right, no,
Yeah.
it's sad. It's
Yeah.
sad, and it's funny you say that he was able to do things for others. And guess what happened? So when he got out of office, all the people from the sticks came out the woodworks to make sure we're not about to have we're about to put somebody in office that hates minorities because
Yeah.
he did
It's the
too much
backlash.
for too
Yeah.
many people. Like, nope, not happening. You had folks voting that never would have voted ever in life until but they were gonna make sure the furthest extreme for President Obama was put in office. You know, and what does it say? That he couldn't do. It's sad.
Every
I don't know if it's a fear or what, but yeah, mm.
it's
What you
ebbs
got,
and
Khalil?
flows. It ebbs and flows, like what you're speaking. Like so, right? It's not a coincidence that right after Obama we get Trump. Like
Yeah.
every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
Y'all want President Black Man? Oh, we gonna give you. we about to go. We about. We gonna get you. We gonna get you Trump.
Yeah.
And because that's the only explanation that can be given by that, because based upon he Trump's a Republican and he's real big with evangelical Christians. Based on everything that evangelical Christians believe, Trump is the complete opposite of that. But they rationalize it in their heads. This well, we support them on this, and we just pray for them on the lying and the cheating and the porno star stuff. We gonna overlook that because he gave us a judge. That's that's how that's looked at. As far as Obama not being able to do a whole lot for Black people. Okay, so James touched on it. Number one, he's the president of the entire United States. So his job is to lead the entire country. I hate it because it seems like Black people, we are the only people who looks toward one single person as a savior.
Yeah.
Like we need to be saved. Like I don't get to I don't need to be saved. Like he's not Superman and I'm not Lois Lane falling out of the building. I don't need to be saved. Like I can save myself because I have the tools to save myself, or I have the mentality to, okay, this is what I need to do for me. Whether I do it or not is completely up to me. But he was like, he wasn't the savior. He wasn't the Messiah. He wasn't Jesus Christ Obama. He was Barack. He's Barack Obama.
Okay, well, let me ask this question. Let's. I don't want to say devil's advocate because that's not the right term for this question. Having said that, Khalil, and us talking about activism, Black people came out in droves to vote for President Obama. Like more Black people came out to vote because of Obama, probably in the whole history of America. Okay. With that having been said, yeah, he's not the savior for all Black people. He's not supposed to be the savior for Black people. But if Black people came out so much in support of this person, does he not have an obligation to at least do one thing specifically for the people that actually got him into office?
Yeah, he does.
What did he promise the people?
It's not about promising, isn't it? Should you have to promise the people to do something that actually did something to get you where you want to be?
A lot of he also had his hands tied. You can't you can't pass laws, you can't do any of those things if you have a Congress that is stopping everything that you're trying to do. Obama, again, astrology, Obama is an Aquarius rising. That means he's futuristic. He's looking into the future when everybody matters. He cares about his people, but that's not, he didn't have the power to save us. We are here to save ourselves, just as Khalil said. And once we realize that there is no Messiah coming, then we will start taking responsibility. And I love that Obama didn't take the responsibility into his own hands. Everyone expected so much from that man. He was gray by the time he finished office.
Yeah, he went gray in those years.
You know?
Yeah.
He couldn't even get a jobs bill passed. He couldn't get, he couldn't get Republicans to vote for Republican ideas.
Okay, that having been said, and us talking about activism, if we get to a point where we actually have a Black man as the president of the country and we still can't get shit done, then how are we going to get shit done? James, you're muted. I think I want to hear what you have to say on that. I can see you already talking.
It's gonna be tough to get. It's gonna be tough to get stuff done because if you look at any Black person that's been in leadership, look at Omar Gaddafi. He was actually about to have a national bank that was backed by actual natural resources, and what happened? They killed him because that would have destroyed the American. That would have destroyed the world economy. Because that would have mobilized Black people in that country and not Ghana, but where was Gaddafi from? I can't remember right now. He would have been the richest man in the world because he would have had the only bank in the world that's backed by natural resources. So you can't tell him he doesn't have what he says he has in his bank.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more so of there's the 99% and the 1%. We are the 99%, but the 1% will never give up their 1% for the 99.
And he blew the whistle at the end of the statement.
It's over.
asking right now. I don't want to leave the
No,
conversation right at this point.
Go
James,
ahead.
let
Go ahead, CC.
Oh, I'm good. I actually have to.
You gotta go, right?
I do.
Okay.
Um,
But I know I hate I have to run. I double book myself. But I appreciated this. I really hope to be back on, and I'll be tuning in to hear the rest of it afterwards because it's gonna be
Yeah.
posted,
mhm.
right?
It's live. Yeah, it's
it's
still
live. It's
on.
on
So
right
yeah,
now.
it'll be on. It's going
Okay.
straight to YouTube now.
Okay. Perfect. Well, you
Thank you,
all
CC.
have a
I
good
appreciate
night.
you.
Bye.
All
Bye.
right.
Nice meeting you, Vera.
You too. Nice meeting you.
Bye.
So Khalil, that one's on you. Wrap it up, bro.
I think James touched on it, and me and you have talked about this. Like
Hmm.
the biggest thing that Black people can really start doing from themselves that'll help us take that step where start to make progress is credit. Wealth. The only thing that only thing that this country really understands is wealth.
Mm.
The if you ask me, the first thing that we can do to come together as a people so we can actually be stronger, we can be less vulnerable, is understanding how this money thing works,
Yeah.
and understanding how credit works, understanding that there's strength in numbers, understanding that when we pull everything together, we have leverage, and when you have leverage, you're able to lift heavier things. So I think that's the number one thing that we need to do. We're worried about a lot of stuff, and we have a lot of things going on. We have a lot of things in our view. The most important one right now is understanding how, to me, is understanding how this money thing works, because the reason why things affect us so much is because we're vulnerable, is because we don't own things, is because we don't control how money flows in our neighborhoods. We don't control our destiny. We don't own anything in our neighborhoods. We barely even have neighborhoods anymore because of gentrification. And gentrification happens on both sides. People come and take stuff, but they can't take anything that we don't give them. So we own it. They come. They come. We're culpable. We're culpable in a lot of that. But understanding this money thing and getting that and 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 getting that together, understanding that wealth is generational, and if you continue to build it, eventually your grandchildren are able to do things. It's that
Mhm.
thing we talked about struggle and sacrifice. Sometimes a generation has to sacrifice for the next generation to be better, for the next generation to be better, for the next generation to be better. So that's where we need to focus at number one.
Mhm.
And I think to add to that, which is true about like what we were speaking of earlier before Khalil joined on, like when everything was in our neighborhoods, that's what it was. But
Yeah.
for me, like I've said, we had this conversation before. The biggest detriment of the civil rights movement was
Mm-hmm.
desegregation, because
Yep.
now we pretty much begged and pleaded to get a seat at the table, and so they were like, okay, we'll give one of you a seat at the table. So every generation, you get one or two or three that you see get seats at the table, and it pretty much creates a not a crab in a barrel mentality, but it creates a mentality of some people, well, why not me? So when you actually gain that, then it's like, okay, I'm looking out for me, I'm looking out for self. So
Yep.
you lose that group and that collective, because at the end of the day, like I have children and I want to make them where they don't have to work. My mom, that's what she did for me, and that's what I want to do for my kids. Like we want that in a generation, but are we really going to actually go through that struggle and sacrifice and die broke so somebody else can live rich?
Mhm.
Mm. Mm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean even die broke. We just say die, not necessarily gaining what you would want monetarily, but you could have a land or property, something that you can send to somebody else, and actually
Yeah.
keeping it in the family over generations, like
Yeah.
generation after generation after generation.
Yeah. Vision. Yeah. Like it's a vision of where you want, of not only where you want yourself, your children, but
Oh, Khalil, I think you muted yourself, bro.
sorry about that.
Uh-huh.
I was
Think you
getting a
muted
phone
yourself
call.
again.
I
Okay.
was getting a phone call.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about
Go ahead. Go ahead
that.
and finish your statement before we move on to the next
No.
thing.
No, I said just having that vision of not only where you want yourself, your family, but where you want, where you want your community to be. Like it's it used to be where when somebody made it, they either stayed in the neighborhood or they reached back and pulled somebody else with them. I don't see that a whole lot. A lot of times it's, hey, I made it. I'm getting the hell up out the hood and I'm never coming back, or
Mm,
I'm leaving. I'm leaving and I got mine. Y'all get yours. I
mm.
get that, but no other community does that.
Mm.
You know, Jew,
No other community does what?
just complete forgets about everybody in their community. Black people are the only community who does that, and we have to stop it. We have to.
Are you saying that, let's just say in a white community, if someone gets out of a bad community that's predominantly white, that they go back and do things to get the people out of the white community?
Not that they go back, but they not that they go back necessarily, but they help people out. You look at any board of any major company or just any company period. You know how many incompetent people you have on those boards? Why do you think those people are there? Because somebody got them that job. somebody helped
Mm,
somebody helped them out. somebody
mm.
somebody greased somebody some, somebody greased the grooves and was able to get them pushed through.
I
you
see
know
what you're
we
saying.
yeah
I see what
so
you're saying.
so by and large, like we don't do that. And not saying we need to put incompetent people up. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying just to kind of look at that.
So
You
you
know,
Mhm.
mean like networking, right?
net,
Networking.
networking, helping each
Yeah.
other, pulling each other up. There's one of the fundamental principles in like business is if you help enough people get what they want and get where they need to go, you'll be wealthy. I think a lot of what we have, and kind of Jay spoke on it, it's not necessarily that crab in the barrel mentality, it's that scarcity thing. You say, okay, if somebody else is up on my level, they may take what I have. And it's not that. There's resources, there's enough for everybody, there's enough for
Mhm.
everybody to eat.
Well, we touched on a lot of things. We've touched on coming back to help our community, and we all know recently with the whole Nipsey Hussle thing, going back to his community, and then he got killed. You know,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that will say, well, that's the reason why those things don't happen, because they're afraid that they're gonna exactly what happened to him is gonna happen
Mhm.
to them. Um, is that a fair argument for people to say, well, I don't want to go back to help the community because look what happened to him?
No, I'll be the first to say no because honestly, I've been a lot of places, and the first place I go when I go to different cities, or even when I've been out of the country to Jamaica, I went to the hood. I want to know where my people are at. Like, why should I
Hmm.
be afraid of my people? Like, at the end of the day, if I can't be around my people, then where am I fit at to live on this earth?
There you go.
Like, it's one of those things. It's like he wasn't, although the way he died, it's unfortunate, but he was dying. He died in a situation of somebody just not being able to control their emotions. I mean, if you can't feel safe at your own store that you own and you own every other building in that place, then where can you go? That's just like being a CEO of whatever company you want to think of, and you can't go into the office because somebody's gonna kill you. Like that way of thinking is kind of crazy to be.
Mm, got you. Got you. What do you think about? We're talking about the way that the young generation practices activism. What do we think about the Black Lives Matter movement? Has that been a successful movement? Is it a lot of people say it's a detrimental movement. It's a movement that isn't supported by or started by black people. It's a movement that some people call it a terrorist movement. There's a lot of different views about the Black Lives Matter movement. V,
The
what
terror.
what are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement?
I think it's really sad. I mean, the world should see. A lot of white people say get over it, and I feel almost like they're not realizing our suffering, and because of that, we actually have to say those words. We shouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter, but we do because Black lives don't matter in this country that we live in.
Mm.
And so those phrases become only because there's a need to be recognized. And yeah, so that's just and I really, it really bothers me when you hear people say blue lives matter or brown lives matter. They're undermining our struggle by saying that.
Mm,
Yeah, you do
mhm,
matter. Everybody matters in this equation. Every race matters. Every person matters. But when I say Black Lives Matter and you respond by Blue Lives Matter or Brown Lives Matter, then you're undermining and undercutting the struggle of my people, which is
mhm.
quite obvious. It doesn't take it. All it takes is our eyes and a heart of compassion to see our struggle. And
Agreed.
everyone should be able to say Black Lives Matter, because they should be able to see that there is a disease that is happening in this country which destroys Black lives, whether it's economical, whether it's killing our bodies, whether it's educational. From every front, systemically, we have been targeted and we have been destroyed. So Black lives do matter, and I believe that's a good movement. But there has to be something bigger than that, because it's almost become like a cliche.
Mm, mm. Khalil.
I was. I'm glad you. I'm glad you said it needs to be something bigger. It needs to be more of a change because nothing has happened. Like there hasn't. Police are still getting off killing black people. That girl down in Texas. If if she doesn't do time, I won't be surprised. Even though she killed a man in his own home, I won't be surprised at all.
Mm.
Be, be, just because that's how things have happened. That's how things have happened. That's how things continue to happen. There there hasn't been any change from it. Nothing has happened. There's been a lot of stuff on Instagram. There's been a lot of stuff on Facebook. That
Yep.
stuff's been great. We've
Mm-mm.
had we've had a few marches, but there's been no. You know what? I'm not going to say there has been any change. The small incremental changes that we had under the Obama administration have been completely rolled back. You
Mm-hmm.
know the national consent decree that a lot of police departments signed and were implementing and were actually and it was actually doing some good. Been rolled back by the by the DOJ under this administration.
Mm.
So there need there needs to be more. There's no respect for African American lives in this
No.
country.
Let me ask you guys this, because that kind of rolls into another point or another question. Louis Farrakhan was banned from Facebook.
Oh, I hated that.
They banned Louis Farrakhan from Facebook. Louis Farrakhan, I've watched. I've watched a lot of his speeches. I really. He says some things that I agree with. More often than not, I agree with a lot of things that Minister Farrakhan says. But why is it that Minister Farrakhan's way of speaking so positively and so strongly about Black people is something that gets him banned? But there seems to be so many other ways that Black people talk about not just other Black people, but ways of activism. They don't get banned. It seems like there's something about Minister Farrakhan that they're saying either what he's saying is too powerful and we can't let him continue to say that, or what is it about him in particular where they say his message about Black people, we can't allow that.
Um, so when they asked J. Edgar Hoover what's the biggest threat to the United States, he said black people uniting.
Mm-hmm.
The head of the FBI said black people uniting is the biggest threat to the United States. So a lot of what Farrakhan, spoke on was about, hey, we need to unite. We need to have our own. We need to be insulated. We need to protect ourselves. And I'm with you, man. A lot of the stuff I agree with some things he said. I disagree with some things he said.
Mm-hmm.
He said some great things, and he's also said some very incendiary things
Right.
about other groups of people. But that's not why he got booed. That's not why he got booted off Facebook. It He got booted off. He got booted off because he's always been looked at that way. In
Mm-hmm.
anybody who talks a lot about Black unity and us owning our own and us having our own gets targeted, and either it's a smear campaign against them or someone is actively trying to murder them.
Mm.
You know, all of, you look at most of our Black leaders have had, you know, threats against their lives or acts for somebody who tried to actively kill them. We lost Malcolm, we lost Martin. Like, we've lost a lot of leaders who were in the forefront. Anytime you talk about that, that's what happens. You get smeared.
Mm.
Either you get smeared, either it's personally, financially, you get smeared, and it happens over and over, and it'll continue to happen.
Let me pose this question to everybody too. Now, we talked about how we can't have, even with Obama, a black president to do something for black people. Is it going to take us having a white president that's willing to do something strictly for black people? And is it possible for a white president to actually understand and undertake the struggle that black people experience?
I mean, we do need a John Brown. You got to have a John Brown in order to get anything accomplished. John Brown was a down white dude. He was down for whatever. He rolled with black people. Like, we do. I mean, not to say that we need it, but it is very necessary for the cause.
Hmm.
It is for the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. What do you think, V?
Yeah, I happen to like Marianne Williamson and Beto O'Rourke. I really like them. And I feel that I feel like, as far as a black candidate, I don't think any of the ones that are running are going to be a contender. So who do we vote for with the people that we're given? Marianne Williamson speaks about reparations. She speaks from a spiritual side, not a religious side, but a spiritual side. She speaks with compassion and empathy, and she understands. Since I believe, I've never read her books, but apparently in the 90s she wrote about the Black American struggle and how we deserve reparations. So the fact that she's running now is not she's not speaking this message now because she wants to be elected. This has always been a message that she's had since the 90s. We need someone who understands the struggle, and I also believe that we need to get into politics. If we had enough people that are representing us, then they can look at our struggle, and they can also assist us in passing laws that will enable us to become benefit more. If we're not creating the laws, then we're only subject to the laws. And the only way that you can change what the laws are is to be a part of the lawmaking system. And that's through getting into politics. And so we see a change happening now. Look how many women are in politics right now. That's a change that I believe we're going to start to see more minorities, more women. And once we gain enough political power, then whatever political decisions are made will not be made from a biased position as it's been for the last 400 years. It'll be from a position of, we're all Americans, it's all inclusive, all lives matter. Once we allow, the reparations and someone who speaks for our struggle to be elected. And I don't know. I don't know who I'm voting for. I've never voted. I voted once in my life. You know that, Fitz, you know that, right?
Yeah,
So,
I know.
but I'm starting to see the importance of being in government and being in politics. And Obama was one man. If he had enough people that were in the Congress and the Senate that were
Mm-hmm.
not biased in their hearts, he could have done more.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
agreed. What you got, KJ?
Oh man, so I kind of it's kind of a difficult question just because I don't look to the president of the United States to. That's not his role. His role is to lead the country. He doesn't even pass legislation.
Nope.
So that's the job. That's the job of Congress. So what we really should be asking is, how do we get more congressmen and senators
Yeah.
elected that that see things the way we see things the way we see it. You know, how do we affect change in the legislature? Because the laws are the legislature, the Congress passes the laws, and those laws trickle down, and they affect us. That's number one. Number two, we need to figure out how we get more locally elected officials
Mm-hmm.
um, in power, because the laws that affect us the greatest aren't federal laws. They're state laws.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, so I look to the president to lead. I look to the president to lead the country as a whole into a better direction. And based upon that criteria, Obama did that. You know, I'm from Detroit. I'm from the state of Michigan, and whatever anybody wants to say about that auto bailout and all that and all that. If that hadn't happened, if
Yeah.
they had just let GM and Chrysler fail, you know, 1 in 6 jobs in the United States inadvertently touches the auto industry.
Yeah.
So if that had to happen, there would have been millions of people out of work.
Yep.
So things, things. And now the fact that had to be necessary, we can talk about that because they,
Mm-hmm.
because they should they, because they should have did a better job of running their company. However, it was necessary. So things like that. That's what I look for. That's what I look for the president
Yeah.
to to be able to do. Lead the country as a whole. When he got in, we were in an economic crisis. When he got out, we were adding jobs at a record pace. What I
Yeah.
fear is the fact that the economy is very cyclical. So it's up and down. There's ebbs and flows, and you don't have a sustained growth for a very long period of time without going into a little recession. We've had sustained economic growth for the past 8 years. Jobs have been added. The economy is expanded, has grown between average of 2 and 3%. Every single year. Now we're in for a downturn,
Mm.
and are we ready for it? Back in 2008, more wealth changed hands between 2008 2010 than almost anytime in American history.
Yep.
That's about to happen
Yep.
again. So are we ready for it? Things are going to be up for
Mm.
sale. Are we ready to buy it? Do we do we know how the stock market works? That's instead of just thinking about, okay, is this president going to be great for us? How do we get our credit right, get our money up, so when that store goes for sale in our neighborhood, we can buy it. And now we have a
Mm-hmm.
store we have a store in the neighborhood. You know,
Brilliant. Yeah.
places with that's where our focus needs to be. Stop. We
I
need
mean,
to
another
stop.
thing too, Khalil, I see what you're saying is absolutely right. Another thing that I've read about too is that as a community, Black people need to have enough money to buy some of these politicians like everyone else does.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
We
Flat
need to
out,
play. Look, we need to play
everybody
Queen.
else puts money in the pockets of politicians to
We
get
need
what
to
they
play.
want passed.
We need to play the
And
game.
we are not able to do that. We need to be able to say, hey, look, we got this money right here. But if you can't do this, then
You're not getting this money, bro.
we're not getting this money. Or we also need to be able to say, look, we got about 48 million votes sitting right here.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? Because we are choosing to vote as a collective
Yep.
based on what you can do for what we want to get done. Now we can either make or break your election. What can you do for
The
us?
the
Mm-hmm.
craziest thing is that Democrats look at Black people and say, yeah, we're going to get their vote. So we don't
Mhm.
a lot we don't have to
Mm-hmm.
court their vote. Whoever
Right.
who- whoever the Democratic nominee is for president, black people are going to vote for us.
Exactly. So
That
the
shouldn't be. We need to make them work for it. Like, hey, look,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
if you
Exactly.
you want to get in office, we vote as a collective, and we get money. So what you gonna do?
Exactly.
Mhm.
V touched on something really interesting too, was something that I had written down. Um, will reparation help us with activism, or are we just going to have to be better with activism in order to get reparations?
What are reparations?
No, we have to be better with activism
No, 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 no,
to
like
be
no, no,
reparations.
like no. I was being dead at serious. Like at that time of the abolishment of slavery, or whatever you want to call it, what we were promised 40 acres and a mule, right?
Yep.
So, what does that look like today?
I mean, there's a monetary value to it. You can give the
Mm-hmm.
monetary value of what 40 acres and a mule is. The one thing that is troubling with it though is that okay, you drop all this money into the black community, then what? What do we do with it?
Right.
What's the plan?
It's
Right.
the Chappelle show when everybody got
Yeah,
reparations.
yeah,
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I mean, like no, not to be like no, not like all serious. I'm joking about that, but like if you give a group of people that never had anything something,
Yeah.
what are they most inclined to do? Buy
Spend
Yeah.
stuff
it.
that they
That's
never
what
had or wanted.
I always say, our people, we get our tax return and people go and spend their tax return. We have to understand the power of money, saving money, investing our money. The reparations, I think if there are reparations, there needs to be a school to teach us financial responsibility and
Mhm.
how you can make your money more effective.
Yep.
There are and a lot of that money can go towards that education, dealing with money, economics, community building, and
Mhm.
no one can get the money until they take the classes.
Mm.
Something has to happen where you want this, then you're going to have to work for it, so you
Yeah.
understand the value of it.
Mm.
And it's not just that if the black community got that money, it'll get spent. It's the fact that where it gets spent, how it gets spent. Eighty
Right.
percent, 80 cents of every black dollar goes outside of the black community.
Well, it sounds like it's happens because there's nothing black in the black community as
Yeah.
well. I mean, you can go down the street and you're in a black community, but your dollar is going outside of the community, even though you're inside physically
Yep.
inside the community. But James, my
Everybody
question
profits off
too
money,
is,
but us.
um, aren't reparations basically if you look at and you ask what are reparations, can't you look at it as payment for building the country for fucking free?
I'm sorry,
I
what you say?
think you're
Repeat
muted.
that last part.
Aren't reparations kind of like payment for building the country for fucking free?
No, reparations actually would be an admission that we did something wrong, and that 400 years of slavery, when slavery ended, we didn't leave y'all with anything. That's what reparations was. That's what the ideal reparations was actually supposed to do. It was actually supposed to. It's actually basically an admission of, yes, we know we did something wrong to y'all for over 400 years, and y'all don't have shit to start with. So here's something to start with, so that you can start to build. But
Hmm.
that has yet to happen, because right after reparations, there was Jim Crow laws and there was all this other stuff to keep people disenfranchised, which
Right.
goes back to that famous word that everybody likes to use now, systemic. It's a form of systemic, like a racism or systemic oppression, in order to keep you in a certain space or keep you in a certain um, in a certain bubble. Because I look at it like, I got a good friend of mine, Sarin. I was talking to him and Ram. They come in Aladdin, and
Right.
we were talking about slavery. So you know that Indian people, because he's from India, Indian people were enslaved. They were all a part of the triangle and all that. But a lot of his people actually landed in the islands like Jamaica, Saint Lucia, all that. When slavery ended, guess what they got to keep? The land that they slaved on. And guess
Wow.
what they have now on the land? Hotels, everything. So you see how they were able to actually build from slavery. Slavery
Mm.
for them was like, yeah, we went through it. And he told me, like, my grandfather, great grandfather, like he pointed out to me. But guess what they have? They have hotels, they have resorts on these islands where they were enslaved now. Because if you actually go visit those islands, you'll see most of the hotels are ran by Indian people,
Wow.
people of Eastern Asian descent, which that was never given to us. And that's what I had to point out to him. I was like, yeah, we were both in slavery, but guess what y'all got to keep and what we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that opened his eyes to a whole nother level of, like, he felt messed up. He was like, damn, that is really fucked up. I was like, yeah, because guess what? Y'all were able to build wealth and generational wealth. Like,
Hmm.
his family owns like 7 or 8 subways. Like his parents just gave him and his sister two of the subways just to run, and he's an architect, and so he's making money hand over fist, and doesn't have to do anything or have to lift a finger or work because his parents were able to come to this country as immigrants with nothing. He told me his father started out as a janitor, was able to buy some hotels, able to get some subway franchises, and guess what he's doing now? He's passing down to his kids, and then Seren can pass it down to his kids when he have, and his family can, and so it keeps trickling down because people are always going to need somewhere to eat, and people are always going to need somewhere to stay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good point. Good point. All right. So let's just go ahead and we've been on for an hour and a half almost. Good stuff, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming on so much. Thank you all so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Let's just wrap up our last question. So, what do each of you think can be done to better our results from activism?
Personal responsibility, taking it upon yourself and looking at yourself in the mirror and more being honest with be honest with yourself where you are, and where you want to go, and taking that responsibility to get yourself to that point. Being responsible for who you are. I think that a lot of times we're able to see fault in everything else around us, but when it comes to being introspective and taking a look at it, where we are, who we are, and what we're actually doing, we have a very difficult time doing that. So the first thing that we need to do is being very honest with ourselves. Just that's where I see it starting. Because if you're not honest with yourself, you can't help anybody. You can't do it. You can't affect change. You can't do anything. Like if you yourself are living an inauthentic life, you won't be able to affect change anywhere, because you can't even affect change within yourself. So how are you going to affect change with someone else, or in a community? So first thing we need to do is look inside, and we need to change ourselves, and then we can begin to, you know, try to help other people.
It is such a it's a great thing to say, but such a difficult thing to put into practice.
Mm-hmm. It
Um,
takes it takes hard work. That's the most difficult thing to do, because I said, like, we can look outward, we can look outside ourselves all day and say that needs to be changed. That person needs to do this. This person needs to do that. But once it comes to really being honest with yourself and making those steps to make those changes in yourself, that's hard, man.
oh yeah,
But it's the
definitely.
work. It's the work that needs to be done in order to get anywhere, though.
What do you think, V?
Yeah, I agree with him. I think it starts with us as individuals, self responsibility, and I think we as we've been caught in a struggle for so long as a people that we're just trying to feed our families. Working hard, working too much, where you get home and you're too tired to even play with your children.
Mm,
The whole family dynamics, because we're so tired, we don't even have time to think about the future generation. So how about we start to concentrate on what's happening now within this struggle and try to heal now, so that what we pass on to the next generation will be a healthier us. We'll be gone, but what can we leave to our children? Can we fix ourselves enough so that our children after us will be better than us, so that the next generation after them could be even better? Everything will happen incrementally. We can't expect magic. We can't. And we see that there's that everything happens in its time.
hmm.
But we can at least do our part to make sure that the time ahead of us is going to be to the best of it. We did our part to ensure that it was better. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's money wise, saving our money, passing our money down to our children, saving your tax returns. That's big for me, because you know how many people I know that get 2 grand and they go out in January and they go and they buy clothes. Their closets are full. Save that money. By the time you're done after 12 years, if it's 2 grand, you have, what is that, $24,000. You can put
Mm.
your down payment on a house. You can get a house in Detroit, Michigan for $10. Why aren't we buying up houses in Detroit, Michigan? Why don't we demand that supermarkets be put there so that we have jobs to send our kids to?
Yeah. Great
You
point.
know? Yeah.
Great points. Jay, is Jay gone? I think James is. I think he's
Yeah, I think.
ref.
Yeah, I think.
No, I'm still here.
I said I think
Okay,
he
what
called him
you
to
got?
foul on somebody.
You yeah, he
I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. I guess I was not talking for a minute. I don't know.
All right, you get the last word, James.
I get the last word.
You get the last word.
I didn't want the last word because I had a joke. I was like, hey, we can't do shit. No, I'm just playing, but like,
Did he freeze
but
again?
honest, no, I'm here. Honestly, like, I think what Khalil said. I mean, it definitely starts with us. I think we are the generation of people because we are the ones in the middle of the old guard is dying out
Mm-hmm.
and the younger generation is still a little too young to take over. So it's like, what are we gonna do? Like,
Mm,
what are we gonna do in the next 20 years when we're 40 and 50? Because everybody that's 60 and 70 now is gonna be dead, presumably.
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm.
But you know what I'm saying? So we're now responsible to, you know what I'm saying, take up that mantle and take up that flag. So we have to tell and we have to be, you know what I'm saying, that catalyst, and we have to show them a different way of doing things than what's been done. So I think it's a long process and it's a long road. Like they said, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I think we have to be the people that have to be that change for what we want to see.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, I think I can't think of a better way to end it than right there, guys. James, Khalil, V, CC, thank you guys so much for coming on this and making this first episode of this Majority Report. Really, I think it was a really good show. So, guys, thank you so much. V, if you want, if you can stay on after everyone else, because I don't know if we're still going to get together for our show later this week, but we can at
Okay.
least talk about it since we're actually in communication for the first time ever right now.
Absolutely. Okay.
But yeah, guys, next week, if you guys are interested in the show next week, I'm going to be joined by a friend of mine who is a Hebrew Israelite that says the Bible and Jesus are only for black people. And
Okay.
Jesus is not coming back to save anybody but our black asses. And everybody else is shit out of fucking luck.
Wait, a black Hebrew Israelite?
But you know what? It sounds funny, but he and I have sat down and talked so many times, and I listened to what he was saying. I'm like, damn, this shit sound plausible.
Keith,
I mean,
You know I was a Jehovah's Witness. I mean, I was a Hebrew Israelite, right?
really,
Oh yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, you might need to be on that show too.
He doesn't want to hear what I have to say.
Well, my friend and I don't believe the same. You know, I don't
Right,
believe in
I
religion
know.
at all. But sometimes he says stuff, and I'm like, damn, I never even thought of that. So it's going to be a very interesting show. We'll definitely need to have you somewhere around in orbit on
Yeah,
that one.
my brother-in-law and my sister run a church, a camp.
Really? All right. Well, we'll definitely get on that topic
Okay.
next week. Monday is going to be that show. I'm not sure what I think tomorrow's topic, guys, will probably be another XJW topic. The one I was going to do Sunday called "Are Women Second Class in the Org/Religion?" So I think someone in the chat touched on that topic once, and I said I will revisit it. So we'll get back on that one. So guys, thank you so much for being in the chat. Khalil, James, thank you guys
No,
for joining
no
tonight.
problem.
Khalil, did you have
Nice
something to say?
meeting you.
Khalil, looked like you had something to add there at the end. You good?
Nah, man. I'm just glad to be here.
I'll definitely holler at you later, KJ.
All right,
James, thank you too, bro. And I will see you all next time, tomorrow, same time, 7:30 p.m. Central, guys. Thanks a lot.
all right, brother.
Peace. All right,
Mhm.
KJ.